Welcome, fellow patriots, to another edition here of the Patriot Report here at Liberty One Studios. I'm your host, Bobby Bones, and I wanted to drop in and talk about what's going on in Venezuela. Um, what a day I'm having so far. It goes like this. Yeah. Yeah, today is just one of them days for me. I got call outs. I got people not doing what they're supposed to do today. Um, just a complete cluster F. Um, for today. But anyway, I wanted to drop on, hop on real quick, and talk about the seizure of that oil tanker down in Venezuela. Now, the way I see this is that, Trump and the neocons, see, the problem with Trump is that um, Trump is surrounded by a bunch of neocons, right? He's got Marco Rubio around him and others. And people like Marco Rubio have been calling for uh, attacking Venezuela now for betterment of 15 years, long before Marco Rubio ever ran for president or anything like that. He has always had a hard on for attacking Venezuela. And, I was thinking to myself that the reason why I wanted to get on is because, I didn't have a platform like this during 9/11, and I wasn't able to speak up and have a voice the way that I do now when it comes to things like the 9/11 report, which is complete BS. Or to speak up against Bush wanting to go into Iraq. People like me, we were called truthers, us libertarians, who was questioning Dick Cheney and George Bush for going into that war. Um, you know, I also criticized Obama, when he expanded the wars. He went into Libya. Him and Hillary Clinton overthrew Muammar Gaddafi. And mind you, Congress never declared war, right? Congress never did that, and just gave kind of like a blanket authorization for George Bush and Obama to do whatever they want. And then, Trump in 2015 ran on, ending the wars. He ran on putting America first and building bridges with countries like North Korea, and he made his platform about talking to countries that we don't agree with, basically saying that both parties have taken horrible foreign policies, positions that have costed us trillions of dollars in treasure and countless American lives. Well, fast forward, and Trump here, Trump 2.0. Now, mind you, in Trump 1.0, the Iraq war, basically, and Afghanistan war, basically took up all 4 years. As a matter of fact, Trump didn't technically end the war in Afghanistan. It was actually Biden who, when you remember that failed, when he was leaving Afghanistan, how weak we looked on the world stage. Well, that really wasn't, in my opinion, what the weak point for America was. The weak point for America was going into these countries and trying to have regime change. And, we've had the war on terror now since about 2003. All right. Here we are 22 years later. And now we have Trump basically combining the war on drugs with the war on terror. And our libertarian position on these things is we are against prohibition, right? If I can convince you through voluntary actions and through peace, I don't have the right to force you to do what I want you to do unless you were trying to harm me and my family. Now, or restrict our personal liberties. Now, the thing about Trump here is that he has completely abandoned his America First position in ending the wars because, you know, it's not just what he's doing in Venezuela. You know, he also uh, did the same thing with Israel. And look at Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine, you know, we're still giving weapons and cash to Ukraine, okay? And, you know, we are putting billions and billions of dollars into this thing. And, you know, so what would happen is Republicans who campaigned with Trump on, you know, ending these wars and, you know, not going to start any new wars have now abandoned those principles, the principles that got them elected, to now start these new wars. And, you know, Trump has failed with Israel and Gaza. I mean, clearly, if you read the headlines coming out of the Middle East, they're still fighting over there, you know, and yet the media is not really reporting about it. It seems like every day people over there are still getting shot, still getting killed. And, you know, again, Trump could have put his foot down with Bibi Netanyahu and said, hey, look, you know, look, what happened to you on October 7th was wrong, right? Everybody's against that. But you can't just go and level an entire city or an entire area, right? Kill tens of thousands of children needlessly, right? And so Trump, you know, then was talking about the Trump Gaza Plaza and all that stuff, and really was showing a different side of him. That's when MAGA started really questioning him on his foreign policy positions. Well, now fast forward, and we're now full, you know, we have so many ships down there. We have so much weaponry surrounding Venezuela. And I believe the neocons like Marco Rubio, their plan was probably something like, hey, Trump, we're going to put a bunch of battleships on the shoreline of Venezuela. Maduro will probably be scared and leave town, and you'll look like a big hero. Well, Maduro's not leaving. And now, you know, we started out shooting little vessels in the water, claiming that, oh, they're, you know, bringing drugs into the country. Now Trump makes fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction, which is completely ridiculous. Because if you look at the numbers of deaths with fentanyl, in 2023, fentanyl killed 70,000 Americans, okay? Fast forward to 2025, that number has dropped to 40,000. Now, mind you, at its height at 70,000, that's a lot of lives, right? But that's not even 50% of alcohol deaths, right? 142,000 people a year die from alcohol poisoning. When is Trump going to declare alcohol a weapon of mass destruction? Not to mention the heart disease and other ailments that alcohol causes. You know, spousal abuse, all sorts of terrible things happen. And again, the libertarian position, we are against prohibition, right? It didn't work with alcohol, right? And it doesn't work with drugs. It's unfortunate, right? We're for giving treatment to people. If somebody commits a crime, right, you lock them up. But this idea that, you know, we're just going to start conquering countries, and expanding the war on drugs, which has been a complete failure over the past 50 years. is this is going to be an even bigger failure, right? Combining these two failed wars, right? The war on terror and the war on drugs is a complete failure. And, let's look at the war on terror because when you look at Syria right now, they have somebody who used to lead, I believe it's Al Qaeda, now is the president of Syria. And Trump's out there shaking his hand saying, oh, he's an impressive guy, all of this nonsense. He invited him to the White House on the 250th anniversary of the Marines, which also pissed off MAGA, which they should be. And then look at Afghanistan. The Taliban is completely controls the entire country, right? So what did we go to war for? Let's take it all the way back to Vietnam. Vietnam, we went in there because of socialism, right? Oh, we can't allow the North to take over the South. Well, guess what? Fast forward now, 60, 70 years later, Vietnam is a socialist country. So what did we get, right? We lost 56,000 of our generation for what, right? And now the neocons are in control of the White House, and they're doing it again, pushing for more war, right? And the entire attitude of the administration is one of an empire. And the truth is that their attitude is, hey, if you do what we say, we'll give you a lot of money. And if you don't, bombs away, right? That's their attitude. And, the thing I have to point out here is that us libertarians and, people who believe in individual liberty and individual freedom, right? What you do in the privacy of your home is your business, right? Now, as long as you are not hurting somebody else, right? You're not infringing on somebody else's rights. It is your business what you do in the privacy of your own home, right? Now, with that said, we are very tolerant people, but we don't tolerate war, right? War that is predicated on lies and BS. And the reason why it now it's come out, this is not just about drugs. Now it's about seizing oil. And so I'm going to read a clip right now that came out. Okay, so this is a report that came out. I'm going to read it, and I'm going to have it up on the screen and just kind of follow along, okay? And this is straight from Trump. Trump said on Wednesday that the U.S. forces have seized an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela, making the latest U.S. escalation in its push towards a regime change war aimed at ousting Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. As you probably know, we've just seized an oil tanker on the coast of Venezuela. President said during an event at the White House. A large tanker, very large, largest one ever seized, actually, and other things are happening. U.S. officials told CBS that the seizure involved 10 members of the U.S. Coast Guard, 10 U.S. Marines, and Special Operation Forces. Other reports said that the tanker, named the Skipper, departed Venezuela and was on its way to Cuba when it was boarded by U.S. forces. Let's put up the other clip. Trump was asked what would happen to the oil, and he replied, well, we'll keep it, I guess. During the first Trump administration, the U.S. stole several shipments of Iranian gas that were bound for Venezuela and then sold them. Iran and Venezuela's trade relationship grew at the time due to both countries facing crippling economic sanctions, and they began to trade gas for gold. Well, I think that's pretty smart. Proponents of a regime change war have pointed to the country's vast oil reserves as a reason to attack Venezuela for those Americans who do not understand why we need to go in. Venezuela, for the American oil companies, will be a field day because it will be more than $1 trillion in economic activity, said Representative Maria Salazar, Republican from Florida, said last month. So as you see, this is not about drugs or anything. This is about seizing the oil. This was exactly the argument that people like us made going into Iraq, right? We made the same argument going into Afghanistan. Although they didn't have oil, they had $1 trillion in natural resources. But the thing that really, the thing that comes out of Afghanistan were the poppy fields that make heroin and opium. And, you know, we paid trillions of dollars in that war in Afghanistan to protect the poppy fields. As a matter of fact, we had troops guarding those fields. So if our, government was really so concerned with drugs, then they wouldn't be protecting poppy fields, right? They would be destroying them, right? And I just want to point out that not only was fentanyl created in America, right? But we still have several pharmaceutical companies that are making fentanyl right now legally for medical procedures in the United States, right? So when is Trump, being that he said that it's a weapon of mass destruction, going to go after those pharmaceutical companies that are still making fentanyl? Now, I'm going to play a clip of Trump, and he's very proud of himself, when he's explaining what happened when we seized the ship in Venezuela. Let me play this clip, and I'll be right back with you.
Well, thank you very much. It's been an interesting day from the standpoint of news. As you probably know, we've just seized a tanker on the coast of Venezuela, a large tanker, very large. Largest one ever seized, actually. And other things are happening, so you'll be seeing that later, and you'll be talking about that later with some other people.
Notice how Trump is so proud of himself. It's the largest, the biggest, the greatest seizure of all time. And, this is the problem, and here's the thing. The neocons in the Trump administration are trying to tie Iran with this oil tanker. And the fact of the matter is that this tanker was going to Cuba. Now, I've been to Cuba several times. This is an impoverished nation. We're going into winter. These people need the oil a lot more than we do. And I find it rather suspicious that all of a sudden gas prices and fuel prices are coming down while all of this is going on. Now, the thing about Cuba, this is a highly Catholic country, okay? They're poor, okay? But they're peaceful people, okay? I don't agree with their system of government, but it is not for our government to put their will onto them, right? If the people of Cuba decided to rise up and overthrow their communist government, I would be in support of that, right? Because it's the people making that choice, right? We shouldn't be involved in that the same way we shouldn't be involved in trying to overthrow the president of Venezuela. And I find it kind of rich that another angle that the neocons are putting out there, Maduro wasn't elected, it was a fake election and all this. That's kind of rich coming from the sitting president, who has made the argument that our elections are rigged, right? And to be honest with you, both parties believe, the majority of people on both sides believe that the elections are rigged, especially for president. And from a libertarian standpoint, yeah, the elections are rigged, but not the way that both sides say. The elections are rigged because they control the election boards and the rules, and they make it almost impossible for a libertarian to get on the ballot, right? They put up arbitrary rules and stuff like this that prevent libertarians from even getting a debate, right? Or getting on TV or how they can raise money. So, yeah, there's election fraud, but it's not in the way that Trump or Biden or Obama or any of these or Hillary Clinton have said in the past. Now, I think it's rich that our government is lecturing other countries on their election results. But look, again, it's not for us to dictate to another country or to try and overthrow their leader just because we don't like them. And the fact of the matter is that that's not our oil, right? That's not their, that's theirs. That's the people of Venezuela's resources, right? And I would rather do business with Venezuela personally than not do business with Venezuela, right? And we know that trade is the best way, okay, for countries to prosper and for countries to not go to war. I mean, look at all the aggression with us in China over the past decade, right? This has not helped either side showing this kind of aggression. Same thing with Iran. Same thing in Libya or now Venezuela or Cuba, right? Or North Korea, right? These policies have not worked. These have all failed. And they're putting our country into the poorhouse. Look, I'm going to go back to it again. How is it that we can have all of these wars, right? Well, because we have a fiat system, and that fiat system, with the dollar being the world's reserve currency, allows politicians to print and borrow a bunch of money, okay, put it on the federal credit card, basically, allows the Federal Reserve to monetize the debt, that allows our government to go around bullying other countries, okay? And it's precisely these policies why the world is walking away from the U.S. dollar. Countries are tired of having to bow to the United States just because we are the world's reserve currency. And every year, we are losing that status. Every year, countries are buying less of our debt, percentage-wise, and are looking to alternatives like gold, okay, and trading in other currencies. And I wanted to go over really quick why oil has dropped. Oil has dropped in the past because this all kind of ties in because now we're stealing oil as if we need it. I thought this was drill, baby, drill, right? Aren't we supposed to be getting rich from all this oil production that we're doing? Well, the fact of the matter is that the reason why oil has dropped is because Iran has opened up new oil pipelines and new oil fields that we bombed into the Stone Age. They finally got their oil fields back up and running, a bunch of them recently. Plus OPEC, the Saudis and other countries have increased their supply and they've dumped it into the market. And so we are benefiting through that trade. See, trade is a good thing. There is an example of why you want to trade with other countries, right? You get lower prices when you have other countries competing for that business, right? And if Trump would just change his policy with Venezuela and trade with Venezuela, right? That oil also, they would produce more oil. We would get more oil, right? Lawfully. The people of Venezuela would do much better. The people of the United States would do much better because we'll get a better deal, right? So us libertarians, we want to trade with people, right? We don't want to go to war with people. People are allowed to believe different things, right? I don't show aggression to people just because they believe something different, right? We shouldn't go to war with, right? I don't go to war with my neighbor because he's a Democrat or because he's a Republican, right? or because he might believe in socialism, or the other guy might believe in capitalism, right? We're not supposed to go to war for that, right? There's nothing in the Constitution that allows this. And it didn't start under Trump, right? This has been happening ever since after World War II. Every single war has been without Congress declaring a war. And this is the problem in our country. And when I see Republicans making the argument that, well, you know, Obama was bombing a bunch of people, droning Americans in the Middle East, that's all true. That's why I'm glad that I have this platform, because I want to come on the record and state that I spoke up about that back then. So I am not a partisan on this issue. Um, I'm against both countries and their interventionism. I believe in freedom and peace and trading with people and competing with people. And if my company is failing, I don't have a right to go to my competitor and bomb their factory, right? If I have a competing company, right, I have to move with the changes of the economy, right? Well, it's the same thing around the world, right? If we want to be the number one nation economically, well, then we have to compete with them, right? We can't just shut down their banking, shut down their trade, start stealing their stuff. I always thought that Christians were against theft, right? Isn't it one of the big 10 of the commandments, thou shalt not steal? And to see my fellow Christians celebrating stealing Venezuelan oil, especially from the poorest people on the planet, people in Cuba, or some of the, you know, they're probably in the top 5, top 10 poorest countries on the planet, right? Is that the Christian thing to do? Of course not. And the flippant attitude from some people on this is rather disgusting, to be honest with you. Now, I didn't have a platform to speak out during 9/11, during the Iraq War, during COVID, right? Well, I have one now, and I'm here to speak out against this sort of thing. And for those of you who are just checking me out for the first time, you know, when President Trump was elected, I sat there and I wished him well. I wanted Trump to succeed. You know, I wished he followed the Constitution. I wish he followed free markets. I wish he wasn't doing the things that he's doing, right? I wanted him to succeed. I wished him well on this program when he was elected. It's not my fault what Trump is doing, right? And people like me should not be shunned out or silenced because now we disagree with this administration. You know, I was in Facebook jail and all sorts of I was shadow banned under the Biden administration for speaking out against COVID and all that. And now I'm being shadow banned again because I'm speaking out against this administration, right? And so there's an attack on the First Amendment. There's an attack on sovereignty, right? Individualism, allowing me personally to trade with other countries, right? Why, if I trade with another country, should I be punished for that, right? If two individuals want to do business together, right, the government should not be in the middle of that, right? We are supposed to be a free nation, a free people. And that's what I stand for. And that's what I'm hoping that I help infect other Americans with is the infection of freedom, the infection of free markets, the infection of the Constitution, right? So anyway, I'm going to let me play a quick clip of the oil tanker being seized. This is unclassified footage from the Navy that was put out, and I'm going to play this clip, and then I'll give you my thoughts, and then I'm going to end the program. So anyway, here's the U.S. military in action. Here they come, jumping out of the helicopter. Here they are, running on the ship. Right, they're landing on it, jumping from the helicopters. Here they come in formation. Yep. Now they break in the door. Yep. There they go. They. So anyway, Max Blumenthal made the argument saying, "Hey, look, this oil is going to Cuba. What are you guys doing?" And again, I look at this, I see this aggression, and mind you, just over the weekend, the Air Force was flying fighter jets literally on the shoreline of Venezuela doing circles. And the thing that was really provocative about that mission, normally there's a certain formation that our Air Force does when they're ready to attack a country. And what they do is they have special instruments to knock down any radar so that our men and women don't get injured. Well, when the Trump administration sent in the Air Force last weekend, they did not use uh, those instruments to knock down the radar. And they were buzzing the shoreline for 45 to 50 minutes, constantly doing circles, hoping the Venezuelan military and people were to shoot at the aircraft because the neocons are desperate for Venezuela to attack one of our aircrafts or ships, right? One of our vessels, so then they can use that to go to war and say, look, our boys are, killed in the ocean in the Caribbean, and now we got to attack. You know, they're dying for that, and to use our troops as guinea pigs like this to steal their oil because we're doing this for ExxonMobil, right? We're doing this for the oil complex, the oil industrial complex in this country, the oil corporate masters that own both parties. Okay, this is why part of the reason why I left both parties is because both parties are bought out by their corporate interest and corporate masters, and the oil masters is just one part of a list of masters that both parties play to, right? And give favor to, right? And in the Constitution and the way our government was set up, it was not set up for the government to favor one industry over another, right? Each individual is given rights. And just because you fit into a special box doesn't mean that you get extra rights, right? And the government should not be stealing on your behalf, right? So if you're like a big oil company, right, the government should not be stealing from individual Americans to then give to the oil companies. Just like it should not steal from one set of Americans to give to another set of Americans, right? That is wrong. Stealing is wrong. So anyway, I wanted to get on really quick and kind of give you my perspective on what I think about what Trump is doing in Venezuela. I think it's pathetic. I think it's wrong. It goes directly against the Constitution and American values, right? If you don't want to do drugs, right, you don't do them, right? Nobody's forcing anybody to do a drug, right? Just like nobody's forcing somebody to sell a drug, right? And the fact of the matter is that these failed wars, the war on drugs and the war on terror being combined, is going to be a much bigger failure than when they were separate, okay? And it's a shame that Trump took this path. I was hoping that Trump would have lived up to being the peace president, and I don't like this kind of aggression. I am completely against it. I am not tolerant of it. I'm not tolerant of war crimes, right? And I wish more Americans would speak up about it. And that's why the MAGA movement has been split in half. Actually, the MAGA movement is like fractured into three separate parts. That's why Trump's ratings are down there with Herbert Hoover and why they're going to get wiped out, I believe, in the midterms. So anyway, I'm going to do my part to always stand up for liberty and freedom and sound economic policies. That's why gold is shooting through the roof. That's why silver is reaching all new highs today, above $64 an ounce, right? That's why you got to get out of dollars, because the government is not going to stop these insane policies. And this is what I talk about. Why I say the past 50 years our government has been going down this road. This is just another part of the 50-year failed policies. So anyway, I thank you, and I hope to see you on the next one. Please remember to hit the notification button, subscribe, like, share, comment. I love you, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.